This is Whisper Sleep Repeat, and today I'm going to be reading a couple of chapters from a book that I just picked up. So there's going to be some page turning, and I'm also going to be drinking some coffee with it. I'm going to be reading a couple of chapters from The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I've been wanting to pick up some more fantasy books, and this one came highly recommended. So I'm really excited to start reading it. And I don't have any video for now, but I will be working on a setup in the near future, so hopefully, hopefully I, have something within the next couple of videos or something, but for now I'm just gonna do audio only. Book 1, The Way of Kings. This is the prologue. To kill. The love of men is a frigid thing. A mountain stream, only 3 steps from the ice. We are his. O storm father, we are his. It is but 1,000 days, and the ever storm comes. Collected on the first day of the week, Bela of the month, Shash of the year, 1171, 31 seconds before death. Subject was a dark-eyed, pregnant woman of middle years. The child did not survive. Sizeth, son of Villano, Truthless of Shinovar, or White. On the day he was to kill the king. The white clothing was a Parshendi tradition, foreign to him, but he did as his masters required and did not ask for any explanation. He sat in a large stone room, baked by enormous fire pits that cast a garish light upon the revelers, causing beads of sweat to form This was the Alethi name for them. It meant roughly Parshmen who can think. Neither side seemed to see that as an insult. The Parshendi had brought the musicians. At first, the Alethi light eyes had been hesitant. To them, drums were bass instruments of the common, dark-eyed people. But wine was the great assassin of both tradition and propriety. And now the Alethi elite danced with abandon. Seth stood and began to pick his way through the room. The revelry had lasted long. Even the king had retired hours ago. But many still celebrated. As he walked, Seth was forced to step around Dalinar Colin, the king's own brother, who slumped drunken at a small table. The aging but powerfully built man kept waving away those who tried to encourage him to bed. Where was Jasna, the king's daughter? Elhokar, the king's son and heir, sat at the high table, ruling the feast in his father's absence. He was in conversation with two men, a dark-skinned Azish man who had an odd patch of pale skin on his cheek, and a thinner, Alethi-looking man who kept glancing over his shoulder. The heir's feasting companions were unimportant. Seth stayed far from the air, skirting the sides of the room, passing the drummers. Music spread and zipped through the air around them, the tiny spirits taking the form of spinning translucent ribbons. As Sazette passed the drummers, they noted him. They would withdraw soon, along with all the other Parshendi. They did not seem offended. They did not seem angry. And yet they were going to break their treaty of only a few hours. It made no sense, but Sazette did not ask questions. At the edge of the room, he passed rows of unwavering azure lights that bulged out where wall met floor. They held sapphires infused with stormlight. Profane. How could the men of these lands use something so sacred for mere illumination? Worse, the Alethi scholars were said to be close to creating new shard blades. Sazette hoped that was just wishful boasting, for if it did happen, the world would be changed, likely in a way that ended with people in all countries, from distant Jakevid, speaking Alethi to their children. They were grand people, these Alethi. Even drunk, there was a natural nobility to them. Tall and well-made, the men dressed in dark silk coats that buttoned as his masters demanded. Today, that included wearing white, loose white trousers, tied at the waist with a rope, and over them a flimsy shirt with long sleeves open at the front. White clothing for a killer was a tradition among the Bershanti. Although Sazette had not asked, his masters had explained why. White to be bold, white to not blend into the night, white to give warning. For if you were going to assassinate a man, he was entitled to see you coming. Sazette turned right, taking the hallway directly toward the king's chambers. Torches burned on the walls, their light unsatisfying to him. A meal of thin broth after a long fast. Flames burned, danced around them, like large insects made solely of congealed light. The torches were useless to him. He reached for his pouch and the spears it contained, but then hesitated when he saw more of the blue lights ahead. A pair of stormlight lamps hanging on the wall, brilliant sapphires glowing at their hearts. Sazette walked up to one of these, holding out his hand to cup it around the glass, shrouded in gemstone. You there, a voice called in Alethi. There were two guards at the intersection. Double guard, for there were savages abroad. Double guard, for there were savages abroad in Kholinar this night. True, those savages were supposed to be allies now, but alliances could be shallow things indeed. This one wouldn't last the hour. Sazette looked as the two guards approached. They carried spears. They weren't light eyes, and were therefore forbidden the sword. Their painted blue breastplate were ornate. However, as with their helms, they might be dark-eyed, but they were high-ranking citizens with honored positions in the royal guard. Stopping a few feet away, the guard at the front gestured with his spear. Go on now. This is no place for you. He had tan, Alethi skin, and a thin mustache that ran all the way around his mouth, becoming a beard at the bottom. Sazette Sazette was sure the man had never seen anything like it before. As far as he knew, Sazette had killed every stonewalker who had ever seen what he could do. What? What are you? The guard's voice had lost its certainty. Spirit or man? What am I? Sazette whispered, a bit of light leaking away from his lips as he looked past the man down the long hallway. I'm sorry. Sazette blinked, lashing himself to the distant point down the hallway. Stormlight raged from him in a flash. Chilling his skin in the ground immediately. Stopped pulling him downward. Instead, he was pulled toward that instant point. It was as if to him that direction had suddenly become down. This was a basic lashing, first of its three kinds of lashings. It gave him the ability to manipulate whatever force, Spren or God, it was that held men to the ground. With this lashing, he could bind people or objects to different surfaces, smaller than most others. Seth swept it out, carving a line in the stone floor and passing through the second guard's neck. As always, the short blade killed oddly, though it cut easily through stone, steel, or anything inanimate. The metal buzzed when it touched living skin. It traveled through the guard's neck without leaving a mark, but once it did, the man's eyes smoked and burned. They blackened, shriveling up in his head, and he slumped forward, dead. A sharp blade did not cut living flesh. It severed the soul itself. Above the first guard gasped. He managed to get to his feet, even though they were planted on the ceiling of the hallway. Shard bearer, he shouted. Gemstones glowed on the walls of the hallway here. King Gavilar. King Gavilar liked lavish display, and he couldn't know that he was leaving sources of power for Sazeth to use in his lashings. The things Sazeth did hadn't been seen for millennia. Histories from those times were all but non-existent, and the legends were horribly inaccurate. Sazeth peeked back out into the corridor. One of the guards at the intersection saw him, pointing and yelling. Sazeth made sure that they got a good look, and then tucked away. He took a deep breath as he ran, drawing in stormlight from the lanterns. His body came alive with it, and his speed increased, his muscles bursting with energy. Light became a storm inside of him. His blood thundered in his ears. It was terrible and wonderful. It was terrible and wonderful at the same time. 2 corridors down, one to the side, he threw open the door of a storage room, and then hesitant a moment, just long enough for a guard to round the corner and see him before dashing into the room. Preparing for a full lashing, he raised his arm and commanded the stormlight to pool there, causing the skin to burst alight with radiance. Then he flung his hand out toward the doorframe, spraying white luminescence across it like paint. He slammed the door just as the guards arrived. The stormlight held the door in the frame with the strength of 100 arms. A full lashing bound objects together, holding them fast until the stormlight ran out. It took longer to create and train stormlight far more quickly than a basic lashing. The door handle shook, and then the wood began to crack as the guards threw their weight against it. One man calling for an axe. Sazeth crossed the room in rapid strides, weaving around the shrouded furniture that had been stored here. It was of red cloth and deep, expensive woods. He reached the far wall, and preparing himself for yet another blasphemy, he raised his shard blade and slashed horizontally through the dark gray stone. The rock sliced easily. A shard blade could cut any inanimate object. 2 vertical slashes followed, then one across the bottom, cutting a large square block. He pressed his hand against it, willing stormlight into the stone. Behind him, the room's door began to crack. He looked over his shoulder and focused on the shaking door. Lashing the